Okay, we're back online now. Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone had a great lunch. Let's press on now with School Facilities Commission's 2023 to 2024 supplemental budget request. So let's consider the draft legislation now to that would be your bill draft 232. Tanya, would you please take us through that?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, recall at your September meeting, you directed staff to prepare a supplemental budget to be recommended to the Joint Appropriations Committee in accordance with Wyoming statute, which requires that this committee provide a recommendation to the Joint Appropriations Committee no later than November 1st regarding any supplemental needs for K-12 capital construction facilities. This bill draft increases existing projects by 30% as requested by the State Construction Department. And in addition, increases major maintenance by $9 million. So starting on page 2, lines 1 through 32, you'll note that's where agency 27 is drawn into the bill. And the $166 million has been increased by $9 million. This is to reflect the $9 million increase to major maintenance. I would note that generally speaking, these are accomplished through the Joint Appropriations Committee. And in the past, we really haven't seen agency 27 in a separate bill draft like this. I just included it for reference purposes for the committee. We also generally don't include the veto language, but again, just included that for reference purposes. And then moving on to section 2, this amends section 313, which if you recall in the budget bill, this contains all of the appropriations to the State Construction Department for purposes of school facilities. And on page 3, line 4, this is just a technical amendment to reference the newly created paragraph, Romanet 13, which begins on page 3, line 18. This is really where the inflationary account is created. And the total funds within the following line items is $22 million, $67,356. And then moving on to page 4, lines 2 through 6. In recent conversations with the School Facilities Department on Tuesday afternoon, there is some concern regarding the language there that notes that these funds shall only be expended after all previously appropriated funds for projects are exhausted, including but not limited to any funds appropriated for the unanticipated costs associated with the project. We'll get to this in discussion. There are a number of projects that do have existing unanticipated funds associated with those. And that really is a policy decision for you all to make, whether you'd like to restrict the expenditure in that manner or not. Moving on to page 4, lines 13 through 18, this appropriates $225,000 to supplement a previous appropriation to Albany County School District number 1 in 2014. That initial appropriation was for $750,000 for acquisition of a property. That entire amount remains unspent. In addition, in your 2022 budget, the section 313 and language that doesn't exist here that we're not amending, you did appropriate $618,000 and changed to the land acquisition fund. So I think the balance of that is at approximately $750,000. Moving on to page 5, lines 9 through 14, this appropriates $135,420 to supplement a prior appropriation to Campbell County for their transportation facility. And as of September 30th of 2022, the balance of the prior appropriation, which is $347,488.26, remains unspent. In addition, that budget bill, as most budget bills, included unanticipated funds as well. That was $649,571.60.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanya, I'm just reading that staff comment and I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. Can you explain your staff note that this is coming back from session laws in 2014, 2015? And that this is just rolling. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding where this money, what this money was ultimately appropriated for. It just seems like it's like a continuous rolling fund. And so I just want to make sure I understand that correctly.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, generally speaking, school capital construction funds don't revert and they remain in these accounts until, well, they do revert, but only upon action of the commission and the state construction department upon completion of a project. And so in the event that a project was appropriated money, but they hadn't broken ground on it, or perhaps it's underway and not completed, those funds would still exist. And the same thing with the unanticipated funds that are noted until all of the projects within that unanticipated fund or within the list of projects authorized to expend those unanticipated funds is complete. Those funds remain with the school construction.
Thank you.
Moving on to page 6, lines 1 through 6. This appropriates an additional $519,178. Again, to Vice Chairman Brown's point, to buttress the 2017 appropriation for component level major maintenance projects. I would note on this particular project, there was a memo from the School Facilities Commission to the district dated April 18th of 2017 that stated that any additional funds required for completion of this specific project would be borne by the school district. Moving on to page 6, lines 29 through 32. This is an additional $6.3 million for component level projects. You'll recall in your 2020 budget, you authorized expenditure of funds on approximately 14 projects. And coming to the amount associated with that, which I believe was $21 million. The final 3 projects, the completion or the cost associated with completion of those was not included within that $21 million. My recollection of the discussion of this committee was that the intent was to have the School Facilities Commission and the department prioritize those projects, which they thought they could move forward with more quickly than perhaps others. And in the event that additional funds were needed for, say, the last 3 projects, if that's how it fell out in completion order, they would come back for another budget request. And I would also note, Mr. Wormuth just pointed out to me that the expenditure of this also requires, again, that they expend all means of alternative funding, including major maintenance and federal funds for this particular piece associated with component projects. Moving on to page 7, lines 24 through 28. This is an additional $1.5 million, $1,527,419 for demolition. Again, it buttresses amounts that were provided in the 2020 budget session. You appropriated just over $5 million for demolition projects associated with 3 specified projects. Again, as with a number of these projects, there was $4.2 million and change appropriated for unanticipated costs associated with projects that included demolition. Page 8, lines 12 through 17. This is an additional $13,360,339 for 5 projects that was authorized also in your 2020 budget. If you'll recall, you had a list of 5 projects that included Campbell County High School District number 1, the high school auditorium with Fremont County High School number 25, and then the last project was the K-12 school in Washakie County number 2. Again, the unanticipated funds that I previously identified, a portion of those funds is calculated as part of the cost of these projects as well. On page 9, lines 7 through 10 provides that this act is effective immediately.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions for LSO on their comments? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a reminder, because I don't have my notes from the September 8th meeting in front of me, the 9 million for major maintenance, what drove that? I couldn't remember if it was square footage or the RS means had increased, or I remember there was a factor, but I don't remember exactly which one it was.
Matt,
Mr. Chairman and Representative Walters, that is a increase in the RS means, which are the cost per square foot amounts based upon the second quarter of 2022, which will be utilized for next fiscal year's budget. So that's a known amount that will go into the formula.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. To the language on the top of page 4, actually bottom of page 3 as well. I'm just curious to maybe hear from our department with regard to only expended under everything else being exhausted and original scope and design, et cetera. But is there any concern at all that the change orders would roll in? Do we have some safeguards in place if we put this kind of language out there and put a fairly significant budget amount? Is there a bit in the horse's mouth?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, as the bill is written, this does not necessarily match up with the supplemental budget request that we put forward for this item. This is intended to be an inflationary fund that helps potentially on bid day. So in the manner that it's written, if it comes after all funds, that would not help us on bid day. Projects would still potentially face a delay or having to go back out to bid in hopes that maybe something would come in under budget at that point. The way that it's currently written, it would be after unanticipated funds. That also requires commission approval. So bids are only good for a certain period of time. That potentially would put some projects in a delay as well. If they went out to bid, they were over budget, we cannot sign a contract unless the funds are actually there. So this inflationary fund is intended to bridge that gap if needed. It's not intentional to add this to the projects at the beginning. It is just if it's needed on bid day.
Let me interject also. My question is, it seems like it's I mean, there's nothing in statute that says that we can't use those funds, and it seems like it's a board policy or commission policy that it has to go back through them. I think if the process was changed within the commission, why aren't those funds available immediately after the bid opening? I don't see a reason why they can't be.
Mr. Chairman, are you referring to the unanticipated funds?
Correct.
Potentially, we would have to go back for that. However, I'll go ahead and add that if there was anything that was to arise during construction that kind of came up, if they started digging and they ran into an issue that the budget wouldn't cover, my understanding is those anticipated funds have typically been for those types of situations as well. And if those were tapped into for this purpose, then potentially you don't have backup funds to keep the project moving. In terms of the commission approval, it's probably something that we could go back and look at on the structure there and restructure if need be, so that if the intention of the legislature was to allow for us to use those in those situations without commission approval, we could certainly go that route as well.
Mr. Chairman, a
Senator
follow-up.
Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, very supportive, and I'm very understanding of the fact that we've got some inflationary pressures out there. My concern was just on just being assured a little bit that there are safeguards there. I'm looking at 3 people that I think would make sure we have safeguards. That as a construction engineer, I can't come to you and just say, well, suddenly I've got another $1 million here. There's got to be some proof in the pudding. And so that's kind of why I bring this up, for a little bit of a conversation about, are we safeguarded there? that these are going to be legitimate inflationary pressures and not change orders that upgrade electrical or something. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair
Director.
and Senator Lannon, it does. We had a little bit of a dry run with this on Coyote Ridge. It was clunky because it was our first one between us. But we were trying to call out that the 6 million, up to 6 million that was set aside was to make bid day whole, not make bid day plus 12 additive alternates. You know, if bid day would not have been able to support those 12 additive alternates, then neither does the 5 or 6 million. We're trying to make the base bid whole with this. So that's one of the safeguards that we're referring to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just want to make a clarification that the ask is for projects that haven't bid yet. And so again, this fund would be used on bid day and not for change orders after the fact, after the bid. That would probably be a process we work through as part of our contingency funding.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, in addition, the funds I believe are for unanticipated are appropriated to the commission at this time, which is why they require that the vote by the commission in order for expenditure of those. So there would be work that would have to be done in order to modify.
So,
Senator Landis.
so Mr. Chairman, I guess that begs another question. If you brought up the fact that that it could be appropriated to the department, are you comfortable with it going through the commission? And is that going to expedite adequately decisions that have to be made?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, the commission approval for this item allowed for the department to have set in motion the parameters for the usage of these dollars, but then also administer, although I believe the appropriation most likely, I'm not sure, does it get appropriated to the department at that point? I'm sorry. Okay, I believe at that point it does. But essentially the commission voted to allow for the department to go ahead and institute the use of these funds.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just someone from the State Construction Department might walk me through this a little better. If we go to page 8 and the 13.3 million for the projects from last year, which include the Washakie County School project, and we'll use Washakie County School project as the example here. If this bill is not signed into law until, say, the 3rd of March, or even could be the 18th of March roughly, or 15th of March, because of when the governor has time to sign it, yet you're going out to bid in February, or maybe getting bids back, if I remember what you had said, how does this money benefit you at all if you have to have all of your money in place to be able to accept a bid, and yet you receive these bids and they have an expiration date prior to when this money would even be available? Do you have, is it a cash flow issue that we're really trying to address here because you have money internally that you can address this? Or I get where you're going. I'm struggling to make the leap to get where you're going is my problem.
John.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, I think that's a great question. Aside from the unanticipated account, which could take some time potentially to get approval from the commission, you made a good point, because projects between now and when those funds are available, if appropriated, presents somewhat of a gap. I think that probably one of the things that we could do is build some insurance into the bid documents that may require the contractor to hold for a certain period of time longer than the normal window that they have to honor their bids. But also depending on the specifics of the project, this one in particular has 2 phases, so we may be able to award the first phase and begin the actual construction of the project. And then incorporate the second phase by amendment into the contract after the funds are realized, if appropriated.
Okay. Further comments, committee? Oh,
Senator Pappas?
did, Valerie, did you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to add that we did ask the contractors on a couple of projects earlier this year to extend their bids or hold them a little bit longer for Lincoln 1 and Lincoln 2 for those projects. So those particular projects could go through the legislative session for those additional dollars to make bid day whole. Just as an example of that, we have gone that route to try to get there.
Excuse me, Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern starts on page 1 and goes over to page 2. We were told during the explanation of this section 027 that we generally don't do this. But I was wondering, and maybe the title of the bill says supplemental K-12 school facilities appropriation. And then we're dealing with here the Capitol building extension, implementing a remedy for the acoustics. Is that just not included in this? Or on line 5, are we only dealing with the school facilities in this section of 027? Just concerned that we're kind of going out of Article 3, Section 24, putting more into the bill than the title states.
Okay. Tanya, did you want to comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchings, good question. Section 27 is the state construction department's budget. And so as a part of their operation is school facilities, K-12. And so really on lines 1 through 32, that's included for illustrative purposes. We would not include the governor's veto in making an amendment to the budget bill. And generally speaking, this is handled by JAC in their supplemental budget process. And so I included it just for illustrative purposes so the committee could see in Agency 27 where the $9 million would be allocated.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on Senator Hutchings' question, historically, this committee has passed a bill just like this, budget session and supplemental session. And this bill is then forwarded to the JAC, and the JAC then incorporates this bill into the budget bill. This is what I would call the vehicle for this committee to share this committee's desires with the Appropriations Committee so that it can be accounted for on the ledger. So while this bill probably will not go forward in an individual format, it will go forward as a subcomponent. I think this year it was section 313 in the budget bill. It'll be something similar to that in the supplemental budget bill. And that's for the last 6 years anyhow. And I think prior to that, even that's how this information has been transferred to the JAC.
And while this committee does have the ability to create this legislation on its own, a standalone bill, as Representative Walters indicated, that hasn't been done in a long time, and it's merely been forwarded to, and I believe by November 1st,
Yeah.
it needs to be forwarded on to appropriations. So,
I have another
Follow-up?
question.
Follow-up?
yeah, do you have a, yes, please, go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Representative Walters. I really appreciate that. So when I look at this bill and I think about the supplemental process, mainly it's supposed to be for dire emergencies. What I'm gathering from this bill is we kind of have a minor emergency in that if we don't have this money in our pocket before these bids start coming through, then we're not gonna be able to move on with the project. So is that what we're considering the emergency at this phase? Thank you.
Representative Walters, would you like to answer that for?
Thank you, Mr.
Senator?
Chairman. I think that that is one component of this bill. You know, the other component is 9 million for the major maintenance side that is being increased based on the RS means change. That is in statute, how that formula works. So we have to plug the numbers into the statute and it kicks out a number at the end of the day. And so we have to match that. But then, yes, we, the legislature, approved all of these projects a year ago. Inflation has outpaced what we built into all of these projects. For 20 years, they always build in an inflationary factor. This year's inflation has been closer to 30%. Most years inflation 4 to 8% is where we've been. They built in, I think, 6 to 7 within the bids a year ago, or within the numbers a year ago. So if we don't approve this additional money, what we are doing is basically saying we were willing to spend a whole bunch of money to then put the brakes on and not do anything. And all of that money we've spent to date becomes a stranded asset. So from a cost-effective standpoint, it makes sense for us to proceed by approving a little bit more money to make sure these projects continue as scheduled and not leave the money that has been spent designing, getting these projects this far into the system just stranded out there in no man's land. And so that is the emergency. Without this money to go forward, we are leaving the previously spent dollars on these projects stranded. And so it does make sense. And a year ago, I don't think anyone in this room would have anticipated the inflationary factor that we have witnessed in the last 10 months. And so it's just the times we're living in today. And that's really the best answer that I have for you is we built in some, but it's outpaced what was built in, and we don't want to leave these previously expended dollars stranded.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Where are we?
to-
Oh, Director.
Thank you.
yes.
So to Representative Walters' point, the one concern I have with this is in the 35 years I've been doing this, unanticipated means unforeseen. And we've been talking for over the year that I've been here about inflation. So this doesn't mean anticipated. I just don't think that's the pot. The goal was to have a set aside to make bid day whole. Now you start bidding and you run into asbestos in the ground. Now you're not anticipated. If we burn unanticipated to make bid day whole first, you're running a project contingency, which is about 1.5% to get you through supply chain, to get you through everything else in the design documents, and then the unexpected asbestos in the ground or whatever. So the intent was not for that on our end. And if we didn't make that clear, then I apologize.
What if it's not used? I know project money is not reverted. But if this pot of money is not used, does it revert? What happens to the pot of money that should we ask for this appropriation? What happens if it's not expended?
Mr. Chairman, money is reverted on projects once it is completed and through its warranty period. We do go through that process multiple times during each year. We did that most recently, and I don't have the number offhand. I know Laura does, but I believe that we reverted roughly, I think, 10 million plus from projects that had been closed out. So this it would also, if once the projects that this potential pot was intended for, there's a small handful, it's specific projects. Once that completed, those projects had gone out to bid and we were past that kind of gap period, if you will. At that point, I believe we would then be looking to revert the rest of these funds back, anything that's unused.
So these projects that were mentioned earlier in the staff comments, that there's still balances there. They're just projects that are not finished.
Mr. Chairman, those are projects that haven't even gone out to bid yet. So
Okay. Who? You? Oh, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to follow up on that comment. the 2021 or 2022 projects, the more recent, the Campbell County projects, the Washakie School projects, we know those are going out to bid soon. So with all of those, as soon as that bid is received and contract signed, then on that list, we would be able to take any reversion back from that essentially immediately, because at that point, the unanticipated cost in the project would make up any differences. But this particular balance of funding would be available before the project is completed, because we would not be waiting for project completion for this particular side of the funding. So we could theoretically get that money back a lot sooner. And should we put language in there, I asked the committee and you, should we put language back that all unused funds that are unused by December 31st of 2023 shall revert automatically, because by then you should have received bids on all the projects this money is planned to be used.
John?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, that's correct, other than think I heard you mention by December of 22 and 23, okay. I just wanted clarification on that, but yeah, we anticipate that these projects will be bid by that date.
Okay, couple follow-ups.
Please.
So then I'm going to walk through the bill with a couple of questions, starting with on page 4, the 2014 session laws, 225,000 going to Albany County for land acquisition. It seems like a fairly finite number. Do we know that they're about to go acquire some land that they need to fill that fund? I realize the point is that if it was not used to date, it was allocated then. But do we need to add an inflationary cost to something that the district may never intend to use, or do we know they're about to purchase something? And I'd ask the same of the Campbell County Transportation Facility, as that came out of 2014. Some of these older projects, should they really not just be closed out and reverted funds as opposed to inflationary dollars added to them, as they are rather old? So a little more specificity on those. Like I said, the ones from this session, and those are easy to address, and I think they make complete sense. It's these that are 4, 5, 6 years old. No funds have been expended according to our staff notes. And so what do we have going on? I get that it's a project that's still in the queue, but is it really still in the queue?
Ms. Hughes?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, for those two in particular, we are not aware at this time for a land purchase. That money is still sitting there, and to my knowledge, there is not a note in terms of how long that money can sit out there for that land purchase. So it's in consideration. If we've included it here because it hasn't gone out to bid. We haven't gone down the path to go ahead and use those funds, but I'm not sure that the department as written for that appropriation would have the authority essentially to revert those funds and give them back because they haven't used them. In terms of the Campbell County Transportation Facility, I believe, if I kind of remember the flow of things here, in terms of there was a piece of land that was being considered for that at a previous time. Through due diligence on that piece of land, it was not a viable piece of land. And so just this year, another piece of land went forward for that particular project, went through the due diligence. And so that those were design funds that were allocated. And at this point, I believe we're at the point where we're working with the district to get that out for schematic design.
Okay. Further comments or Representative Walters? You good with that?
Mr. Chairman, we'll just keep walking through these. We have a 2017 component level in Jackson for 519,000. Do we know where that is? Or is this another one that is just a calculated value because we don't know where it is along in the progression of the project? And that's the top of page 6.
Yes, page 6.
Mr. Chair, Representative Walter, I'm trying to recall what this one is for. We'll ask our team. If you give us a moment, we'll ask our team looking at this one. Yeah, appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, where I'm going with all of these is if some of those could be eliminated, while it only amounts to, I say only $1 and a half dollars out of the 22 million. If we can reduce it, it becomes a lot more defendable on the floor. If we can explain the most recent projects are seeing this huge inflationary pressure. This project from 2014 for a possible land acquisition somewhere else. We carry in this part of the budget about 750,000 for any district to access for land acquisition. And currently, as of last year, there were really no districts looking at major land acquisition. Plus, the districts have some responsibility for that. And so as we go through these, again, it's not a huge dollar value, but to me, it's more of a defensible position for this committee and for this bill when we get to the floor to be able to say, again, 2022 has been an extraordinary inflationary year. And the projects we approved last year are feeling these pressures. The projects we approved in 2014 would be feeling the pressure regardless. At 4% a year for 6 years, you get 24% right there, and so that would be a sizable inflationary pressure. But should we be worrying about that in this bill? And so that's where my line of reasoning and asking on these older projects to the good commission or state construction department.
Mr. Chair, I think we have an answer to one of your questions right here.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, in particular on Fremont County School District number 25, the Jackson Elementary School. Our most recent conversation with the district on this particular one is that they're expecting to put this out to bid next year. I believe it was just a time consideration for the things they had going on and whether or not they could actually manage all the projects that they had.
Okay, thank you. Representative Walters, did you have others to discuss? Okay. Committee, Representative Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, going back to your concerns raised over the issue of depleting unanticipated cost funds. Is that something we may want to consider amending on page 4? Am I reading that correctly, or what is your desire on that front?
Mr. Chair and Senator Landon, that wasn't our intent to have it come out of there. So if we've misstated that, we apologize. I think just holistically, unanticipated means we didn't know about it. And we've been discussing this for a year, so we know about it, first of all. And secondly, in my past, unanticipated is for unforeseen. And that's stuff that happens on the project that is unforeseen, that could be greater than what project contingency can pay for. And so therefore you step up into unanticipated. That's my experience. And so we'd be using it in a different way. We'd be loading up the unanticipated with anticipated inflationary money. And I mean, we'd go in inflationary, which is anticipated after we deplete unanticipated. So I don't know, it might sound like semantics, but to me, there's a difference there.
No, I think that makes sense, Director. We may want to look at that committee. I'm not completely comfortable with the department depleting all unanticipated funds out of a line item before we get to these funds that we intend to replenish. Because as the director points out, that could be anything from an asbestos fine to unanticipated structural difficulties or whatever. Just food for thought. But thank you, Director.
Committee, further questions? Okay, Better be looking online here. Do we have any hands up? No, we don't. Okay, I think what we'll do, since this is going to be a budget, we'll go on, I think. We won't take any action on it right now because there's some items that could be or could not be included in the budget. We do have some, we have 2 districts that want to talk to us, and then we have some committee recommendations to the Joint Appropriations Committee that we will and the governor that we will discuss. So and then I want to hear some public comment as well. So let's just hold on to this right now, and let's bring up Laramie County District Number 1 and listen to what presentation they might have. Good afternoon, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I have a question I had sent over a PowerPoint. Are we going to put that up or am I just going to discuss it?
I'll have to ask the committee. Do you have a PowerPoint to put up on the screen?
We don't need it. I just didn't know I had sent it over with our documents ahead of this. So
Okay,
if we're not, I'll just go ahead and continue.
okay. It looks like it's coming up.
I'm Andy Knapp, Director of Sport Operations, Laramie County School District 1. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I want to thank you for allowing Laramie 1 to present this supplementary budget request today for our school facility needs. We feel this proposal is a continuation of and complements the state's funded most cost-effective remedy study, which we undertook in 2018. The district's proposing eliminating 6 K-6 elementary schools and replacing them with 3 more contemporary buildings, 2 of which will be a K-4 elementary and 1 5-6 elementary, which matches our 5-6 model that follows our district standards. And the benefits and plans to the district and the state are that this helps eliminate 6 aged schools, average about 67 years in age between them. And we have about a dozen of these schools in the district that were built approximately that decade that are the same style. They're on the list of the 100 oldest schools of buildings in Wyoming. And 3 schools that enable the district to move away from these teaching methodologies designed for the industrial age allows a more contemporary approach to the delivery of education today. This approach, we feel, resolves our facility condition concerns on 6 buildings, also reducing major maintenance costs. And this approach is fiscally responsible, it's more efficient, and through consolidation creates an economy of scale. This will create an enormous cost savings for decades to come for not only the district, but the state. So when the 6 older schools are replaced with these 3 newer ones, the resulting K-6 capacity in the South Triad would be at approximately 83%. This utilization is appropriate and still leaves room for growth. And this plan continues with our district's 5-6 grade configuration and will essentially complete our K-6 work in our South Triad for several years to come. On our Mercer study, the design remedies were to remedy less than 90% capacity while continuing with our 5-6 grade configuration and phasing out older buildings, reducing major maintenance burden on those, as well as staffing burdens that we're facing today. We're designing them with respect to our 3 triads within the district and also respecting the appropriate school sizes. Next slide. Can I change the slide? Oh, there we go. So the K-6 remedies, and this here is just a list. These are the 100 school oldest buildings in Wyoming. As you can see, we have 19 schools on there. So we hold 20% of the oldest school buildings in Wyoming, along with one of the latest school facility condition, the latest one that was put out in 2016-17, I believe. We hold approximately half of the top 20 on that list as well, which basically replicates what's on here. Next slide. So this will give you a little, this is just some background information for what we're talking about here. So Laramie County School District 1 is set up in triads. We have 3 high schools along with an alternative high school, but we have 3 secondary systems in there that our elementary feeder schools feed into, and they're the central, the east, and the south triad. Note the red line there that delineates the south triad from the rest of them. And on the next slide, you'll see in our active growth map for Cheyenne, if it's that same green line there that was delineating our south triad, most of the active growth is coming in the south triad that's projected for down there. And currently those numbers, these are internal numbers we have, but those numbers you're seeing in the boxes, those are only based on platted lots that are sold or for sale or under construction. It's not any projected growth. It doesn't include the build out of any of those subdivisions. And in the south triad there, if you look, there's almost 600 secondary and elementary students total coming from that build out right there. Next slide. This is current district configuration of all of our schools. Comes from our previous Mercer study as well. If you look on there, the schools that are purple and orange are schools that are either in need of replacement or major renovation. And you can see that group of 6 there in the south triad is one of our largest groups of schools that we're trying to address with this request. This is just a little bit closer up. This is the south triad consolidated there. So you can see those same 6 schools: Cole, Hebert, Arp, Fairview, Lebhart, and Bain. And those are the schools that we're looking at proposing this for. So our proposed K4 and 5-6 would be this. Those are the 6 age schools that would be demolished or disposed of. Where that letter C is a K4 elementary, which replaced Cole Elementary. The other K4 over there where the letter B is replaces ARP Elementary. And those 2 sites were chosen because they have adequate plat sizes. So we have enough acreage on all 3 of those sites to be able to build schools without having to do any land acquisition or infrastructure to those sites. The other sites that we're looking at disposing of are generally, I think one of them is less than 2 acres. The other ones are 3.5 acre sites. So they're not very adequate for even replacing a school on. Next slide. Next slide, please. So for the supplemental budget request, this is our opportunity for time, and looking at the project timeline for these. I'm here today requesting funds for this October of 22. Of course, appropriations would be in July of 23. And typically, if we were able to move forward through that, this would be best case scenario that we could complete construction of any one or all of these schools by December of 25. And with, again, with supply chain and inflation and different things we're facing today, staffing shortages, that's best case scenario probably, and probably optimistic. If it was to run over, obviously it wouldn't really hurt the school year, but it easily would run into a fall start of 26. So, even acting today on this, my feeling is we have a dozen schools in this condition. And if we acted today, we're still 4 years out from addressing half of those schools. Next slide, please. This is our current funding request for the demolition. We would have to demolish ARP and Cole because we're going to rebuild in place of those on the same site. So using the budget worksheet for demolition, the costs of those 2 schools came out about $1 million. The other ones, we would have the option, obviously, to demolish or just dispose of with the buildings on them and possibly save that cost.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the old Cary Junior High be used as the swing space for that? Because that's what we were sold when we went ahead with building the new Cary Junior High, that was the linchpin to create that extra space so the old Cary could be used as a swing space for these new construction projects.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, that's correct. The old Cary, we call it East Ridge now. It was originally an East Ridge Elementary with Old Cary Junior High attached. We're using that. We've used it as swing space for a couple of other schools we had to rebuild. We had a school demolished twice by a hailstorm. So we used it as swing space for that. We used it as swing space for Buffalo Ridge and Dildine Elementary when we renovated them. And we're going to use it this coming fall for swing space for the new Coyote Ridge 5-6 Elementary, because the substantial completion of that is December of 23. Next slide. So this is our current funding request. We've gone through this, and the new 5-6 school in the South Triad, the numbers that we used were off our current Coyote Ridge construction costs going up. And so that the total cost of that 5-6 prototype school is around almost 33 million. The two K4 elementary schools that we would put out there are about 22 million each. And if you add in the demolition cost of the two schools, it totals 79,916,000. That's our total request for funding in the supplemental budget request for this project.
Co-Chairman Brown.
Thank you. Andy, I appreciate you bringing this forward. I'd like you to maybe go in just a little bit more detail if you could for the committee's consideration. You guys recognize here that you guys have the prototypes and that this was done for a very specific reason in order to keep costs down. You guys have already built these schools. The understanding of what's going to go into this, not only from the local school district, but also from the state facility side, there's an understanding that this is a lot easier to go through as opposed to having to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, bringing it all back in there, redesigning everything. So if you could go into a little bit more detail on that, why you guys chose the prototypical schools, I'd appreciate it.
Correct. So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, the 5-6 prototype school, when that model was adopted by the Board of Trustees and Laramie County School District, they designed and developed a school with they had a committee and a lot of community input on what was needed and what was going to make that model work. And so once they came up with that plan and design, we had submitted that as a prototype school. The first time we built it, we value engineered it, I believe 4 or 5 times, and got it down and got the design pretty finite to what we felt we needed. And what that school allowed us to do when we put it in a triad where we have overcapacity or old schools that need to be taken offline, and we can pull all of the 5-6 students into that allows us to be able to pull a school offline, renovate schools, consolidate schools, whatever we might need to do with that. So we've built it as Meadowlark Elementary, and then currently we have Coyote Ridge Elementary going in, which is 5-6 of that prototype. So when we're able to submit that, even our last contract with the state for Coyote Ridge was labeled as a fast track program or contract. So we're able to jump through some of the steps and get there a little quicker. So that'll help us a lot with our 5-6 elementary. What we're looking at the K4 is we would look at something else that the state has already approved. We've looked at a couple plans. There's one that fits very similar design to this 5-6 elementary we have as far as the layout and being able to expand it. The classrooms have been put, instead of what you would think of as a more industrial type school that's, big box school. Your common spaces are in one end where the classroom wings kind of fan out as they go down down across the plat there. And it allows us, if we have enough room, to be able to add on to those classrooms. And so we have looked at plan one, just give us an opportunity to look at one that had been built. The state had approved, I believe it was in Buffalo, maybe Cody, 2 or 3 towns within the state. And then we also have a couple we've built that work well for our district that are 2-story plans should we need that. So the plan is to be able to use a prototype school, not have to go into a complete redesign, And then, of course, use the land without having to do land acquisitions right now. And be able to fast track this program a little bit to get caught up on some of our facility needs.
Okay. Continue, please.
Next slide, please.
Oh, we got
Mr.
another
Chairman.
question.
Oh, sorry.
Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions on the disposition of those. Can you hear me okay? On the disposition of those 4 schools. You obviously have no costs associated. So are those, is there already some interest in those? And then just, I guess, a point in my community, we built a tremendous number of new schools and we've lost all of our neighborhood schools. So there are 2 neighborhood schools left in my whole community. The rest are all, and you guys have Triad, so it's a little different. But it sort of worries me a little bit, the demolition of those 4 out of those neighborhoods.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Banks, what I would say to that is, if back on that map we had up there, those schools are consolidated. I do have a map that shows a 1 mile radius of the schools, and from the furthest school to one of the new ones we're building is less than 4 miles. So they're pretty consolidated. They stay within the triad, within the neighborhood pretty much. And the other part of that is this block of schools we have, at the time they were built, I'm sure they served a purpose, but they're very small. They're on inadequate lots. They're not good candidates for remodel. We've remodeled 2 that were good candidates over the last few years. And so whether to remodel or replace them, I don't think would be cost effective for any reason on those 4. And one of the reasons we chose the 2 we did to demolish and replace are the fact that they do have adequate lots. They're centrally located pretty much within that range of those 6 schools. And we'd be able to accommodate, the neighborhood kids as well as busing into those fairly easily.
Just a second. One thing that was brought to my attention, we've had 2 schools in Laramie One in the past that we've disposed of, and they were turned around, purchased by a private entity, and now they're charter schools. And so the question is how quick do we dispose of schools and because it costs us, I don't know what that number is. It's a big number in leasing schools that we disposed of. So just a caution there to everybody. Sometimes it could come back and bite us.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great point, and we've discussed that at length. What I would say about that, I did not include it in the budget request here, but as you saw in the demolition of those schools, it costs about $1 million each to demo a school. 2 of those 4 schools left are a little smaller, so it'd probably be less than that. Our preference would be to demo the schools and dispose of the vacant land. I think it's probably easier to get rid of the vacant land given the condition of those schools. I don't know that they serve a purpose to be turned into much of anything else, and also given the locations. But we've chosen to leave that extra cost out of there right now until we decide what's available and what we could do.
Thank you. Pardon. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Senator Landon.
So just, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just catching up. Where has this presentation been made, Mr. Knapp? Have you presented to the commission or to the department on this, or are we the first step?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, yes, I have. I presented to the commission in Du Bois about 2 months ago. I've spoken with the State Department. We had a meeting here prior to this one of what we were doing with this, and we've presented within the district as well.
So just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, what was the reception, and what can you share with us what the commission indicated to you, or what the department and you discussed? Or
Mr. Chairman, Representative Landon, there was no indication. I gave the presentation, and everyone heard me out, and then I spoke with trying to remember. We talked a little bit. I spoke with Senator Pappas and Representative Brown about this at the last select committee meeting. They asked me to present this here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So Andy, I think you have a couple more slides.
Actually, I think we were on the last one there. We could pull that back up. So the current funding request, again, the benefits of the state and the district, you know, as we see this resulting, and again, based on what we feel followed along with that current Mercer study that the state had funded for us, was the resulting K6 capacity in the South Triad would be at approximately 83% when this was complete. There's an attachment in the material I had provided as well, which gets us to a percentage of capacity that allows for a little bit of growth and expansion. We're able to take 6 age schools off of our maintenance list and off of major maintenance. And that resolves the condition of those schools. It maintains our district preferred 5-6 configuration, and then provides operational expense relief to the district as well as staffing relief. I'm sure you're all aware, and everyone across the state right now is well aware of the staffing issues that we're having out there. And to be able to do that with 3 new schools versus what it takes to maintain and operate one of those older schools would be a huge benefit to the district. And our square footage was based on the SFD square footage calculator, and costs were based on, recent Coyote Ridge hard costs. So we tried to stay as close to the district rules and guidelines as we could with this, tie it into complement our Mercer study that was provided by the state, and use the hard bids directly off Coyote Ridge that is under construction currently. So these numbers are probably as close and exact as you can get at today's date. And given the age of these schools, I don't think those numbers lie at all. I think they're pretty accurate.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any further questions? Mr. Knapp? No? What's that?
Just checking to see if there's.
No, I don't see any hands up online. Further questions? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the presentation from Teton County. Welcome, ladies.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee, Gillian Chapman, Superintendent in Teton County.
And I'm Janine Bayteski, Board Trustee in Teton County.
Thank you for inviting us back. We provided an updated packet to Ashley Phillips, and very much appreciate Ashley's help in getting this information posted and also to you in a timely fashion. So thank you, Ashley. On the second slide, you'll see. Oh, sorry.
Are we going to put the slides up? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah.
It's not really a slide presentation, is it? But was it okay, go ahead. Put up with.
I guess the question is, can you follow us from your packet?
So the second slide is actually out of our most cost-effective remedy study in 2018. And for the district, we rely heavily on both the 2015 and the 2018 most cost-effective remedy study. And that enabled us to develop long-range plans and also respond to growth in our community. And this slide indicates that the district's current enrollment and housing data are right on pace with exactly what was predicted in 2018. And as a reminder, in Teton County, because we are relatively small, but we're also in this valley, we lack the flexibility to respond to new student enrollment. in the secondary schools. For example, I don't have a nearby community that I can have a relationship with and say, oh, hey, I don't have enough seats available. Can you take X number of students for us? This data and the most cost-effective remedy study from 2015 and 2018 drove our local request for the specific purpose excise tax that our community will be considering for 40% of the Bronc Achievement Center funding. Oh, thank you. The next slide, please. Slide 3 is our actual October enrollment date history. So you can see what the elementary, middle school, and high school grade band is. Like many communities, we had a little bit of a dip in elementary school during COVID. A lot of families didn't want to send their kindergarten and first grade students to school, not knowing if they were going to be actually present or not. However, the opposite is true in secondary. We had a significant enrollment increase during COVID in our high school because many of our families, and Trustee Teske will be talking about this shortly, many of our families moved to the area because we were in session and they wanted their secondary students, their high school students, to have the opportunity to participate in activities and be face-to-face. The other unique factor at the bottom left-hand corner of this slide talks about our independent school enrollment. And between our homeschool students, which typically, meaning pre-COVID, we had about 28 students involved in homeschooling. Now we have 83, which is down from 138. And in addition to our independent enrollment, school enrollments, if any of those students, families, or schools decide that they're no longer, it's no longer feasible for them to attend, we could have up to additional 411 students coming to our school district. So those enrollments are always a little concerning for us. Next slide, please. Slide 4, you will see our active enrollments as of October 13th. We have a middle school that's grades 6 through 8, and a high school is grade 9 through 12. And you will notice in this slide, the senior class is our smallest class, and that's sort of in the goldenrod middle column. It's our smallest class coming in. And when we're already at 85% enrollment, just sustaining these numbers with the growth that's coming in and the small numbers that are of the graduating class that are leaving, we are going to be pretty darn close to, if you look on slide 5, so the next slide, please, you'll notice that in the 23-24 school year, we're looking at being at 92% capacity. And I'll note that we've added 184 students since 2021. And the predicted fall enrollment for next year does not include the number of students that are likely to be added to the high school, given the number of housing units, which we'll get to here in a moment, that are currently under construction. We have already, and I know you all are aware of this, but I really want to reiterate, as a school district, we've done everything we possibly can do. We considered grade reconfigurations. We've taken out lockers to make small classroom instructional spaces. We've knocked down walls in the library to make smaller classroom instruction spaces. We have closed enrollment to out-of-county students. We investigate addresses, and we send students back to their home community if they have not been truthful about their residences. Our teachers share classrooms. None of these are easy decisions to make as a school district, but we're at a point where we simply are out of options. Slide 6, so the next slide, this is an example of our culinary class. Our high school was built pre-2000, in 2000, and we did not have a culinary lab. So these are images of the culinary classroom that actually meets in a former section of the cafeteria. Hot plates are used as there are no stoves available. We added drop-down wiring to meet fire codes. for the hot plates and for mixers to be plugged in. You can see students in the bottom left-hand corner standing around the perimeter waiting for their turn because we just don't have enough stations or for them to work at the same time or safely. And this is one of the most popular courses that we have. And it's also one of the most in-demand industries in our community, which relies on local workers for the tourism industry. The next slide is growth factors. And you asked us last time we were before you, what was triggering the growth in our community. And there are 3 factors, and Trustee Teske will cover these for us.
So the 3 real growth factors that we see are birth rates, what we refer to as move-ins, and you've heard a lot about new construction. Next slide, please. So we'd like to talk a little bit about move-ins and remote workforce and the impact on the changes between 2001 and where we are now. And I'll go very quickly through these slides, but they're kind of important. And I hope you pay attention to them because in addition to the impact it's having on our community, if you really think about it, it potentially has some opportunities for Wyoming as a state in terms of growth of industry. Next slide, please. Doesn't like the next slide, I guess. You'll see here, and one of the biggest differences I want to point out to you here is the size of these 2 pies. You can see that the pink is what, or purple, I guess, on your slide is what we refer to as the location neutral employees versus the gray, which is the location dependent employees. And when I'm referring to location dependent employees, and you see the changes from, say, almost 13,000 in 2001 to over 17,000 in 2022. A lot of that has to do with the growth in the number of hotels that we've had and picked up. You'll also see that we've grown from about 2,500 remote employees to close to 3,800. Next slide, please. In addition, you'll see that our employers have shifted. The number of employers that are now location independent or location neutral, I should say, has grown to about 46% of our workforce. And this is what Superintendent Chapman was talking about, is that we particularly have seen this as the situation in California and New York has not been attractive for people to live in terms of taxes, in terms of COVID, and their students attending school. And consequently, we have picked them up. Next slide, please. So to sum it up, what I'm telling you is that our location neutral employees have grown by twice the rate that our location dependent has. The next few slides just basically go through the wages. I won't dwell on them, but if we could flip through till we get to, keep flipping, please. The slide that says 2020, 2022 on the top, because this is pretty important. Next. This work was all done as part of the Charter Institute in Jackson, which puts on a conference every year, which talks about how the community is changing and the like. Is it being slow? All right, great. This is the one I wanted to focus on. As you see here, and it's kind of interesting if you, I'll let you go back and look the rest of them by yourself, but you can see the huge growth in the our job market in terms of information, financial services, and professional services. And this is where that pie got bigger, and we're picking up the location neutral folks. And I guess the next slide just shows you that, you know, COVID brought us lemons, but COVID also brought us lemonade. And what does that mean? You'll see a huge change in our weekly wages. A lot of this change that I'm showing to you in terms of the shift in our job market is really responsible for the enormous growth in our assessed valuation and our property taxes, personal property taxes. So like I said, I hope you go back and look at these. This is certainly a huge element to us in terms of folks coming in and bringing new students to us. But in addition, I think it really presents a huge opportunity for the state. And if you think about it, and where can we potentially grow our revenues as a state?
So as we used the two previous most cost-effective remedy studies, and we had a housing study in our community, we looked at the new construction, and this slide explains on slide 21, the estimated enrollments of housing type and the rooftop multipliers that we used. We used conservative estimates so that we could see the difference between deed restricted workforce and free market homes, as well as dorms, studios, and 1 bedroom or more units. So if it was a dorm or studio, it has a rooftop multiplier of 0, and then 0.5 to 0.75 for condos, apartments, and townhomes, and single family homes had a rooftop multiplier of 1.8, meaning 1.8 children per rooftop of a single family home. The next slide is an aerial view of the projects that are currently under construction and will have occupants by 2023. So they're spread pretty evenly across the valley. And these units total about 2,100 units. The next slide is slide 23, is a graph that was provided by the Teton County Housing Department, indicating that there are 825 affordable and deed restricted housing units opening soon. And again, we used the pretty conservative rooftop multiplier of 0 for dorm and studio units and 0.5 to 0.75 for the larger, for 1 or more bedroom units. Also, interestingly, research indicates that deed restricted and affordable housing units generally have more children in each unit versus the free market units. The next slide you've seen before. Again, this is how we try to predict the summary of what we think will be coming to our schools based on development that has been approved and underway. The 3 on this slide are ones of bigger concern to us simply because of the size of them and because they are predominantly single family workforce or deed restricted homes. So we've made these estimations trying to be realistic and conservatively estimate our potential enrollment. Our biggest concern is knowing that these are headed our way and knowing that we are already between 85 and 92% capacity just on our cohort survival rate. We're very concerned about these housing units coming on board, and we're behind already. Simply because we are out of other options.
So Mr. Chair, if I may interject at this point, there's been discussion about what the real capacity of our high school is. If you recall, we told you in the beginning that it was built in 2000 for 500 students. Dr. Chapman and I have had a lot of discussions with the department. The department is showing the capacity of our high school at 1,006 students. So when she's referring to us being at 85% capacity, we are not questioning the mechanism by which the department arrived at 1,000 students, even though being that the school was built in the 2000 era, there's certainly perhaps some room for thinking that 1,000 is more than it really could accommodate, but we have accepted their numbers, and that's what we're using to project our capacities.
Slide 25 is essentially a summary of our efforts to continue to look ahead and recognize the new development in our community and what our current limitations are. Slide 26 is our district's long-range district operational strategy and things that we have tried to do to alleviate the capacity issues that we have and focus on the future while trying to be nimble and prepared for what is coming our way. The most cost-effective remedy studies have been very helpful in directing our efforts and providing the important information and data that we need to make these decisions. And that's where we are now with the capacity and the suitability where we need to address with the addition of the Bronc Achievement Center and a new bus barn. So slide 27, summary of our bus barn. It is out of date. It was built in 1976. We had approximately 1,300 students enrolled. Right now, we're about 2,800 students and some change. We only had 10 buses in 1976. Currently, we have 47. It's a 2-bay facility, and it's completely inadequate for safely and efficiently serving the needs of our maintenance supervisors. It's near the top of the non-educational facility needs list, and it's a huge priority so we can protect our assets as well as provide safe transport to school. The next slide is a summary of the bus barn. We've talked about the capacity issue, but the age of the structure highlights the condition shortfalls, the suitability shortfalls, the safety shortfalls, and the efficiency shortfalls. So in summary, our top immediate needs are on the next slide, and that is slide 29. We need facilities appropriate for the programming and the capacity of the student body. And we need transportation and a maintenance facility to safely get students to school and maintain our assets. Slide 30 is a draft illustration of what the Bronc Achievement Center rendering would be like. It's a prefabricated facility that has an estimated cost of $36.5 million. As I know you're also aware, we are on the specific purpose excise tax ballot November 8th for the community spaces. We also are using recreation district funding. We're privately fundraising and then seeking funding of 20 million from the legislature for the academic space. And this would add approximately 650 available seats every single day for our students. The next slide would be the interior renovations. And what we'll be doing is moving the larger classrooms like the culinary classroom, for example, that would move out to the Bronc Achievement Center so we could reclaim that section for the cafeteria so students aren't eating in the hallways, as you can see in this picture. We'll be moving some other larger spaces out to the Bronc Achievement Center so we can renovate. And so this portion of the request is 1.8 million to renovate the interior space for academic spaces. So the total for the Bronc Achievement Center is that we're seeking from the legislature is 37.8 million. And that would resolve the capacity issues that we have today and for years to come in grades 9 through 12.
Excuse me, it's 21.8 for the Bronc Achievement Center. The rest is for the bus.
Oh, sorry, yes. Thank you. 21.8 million for the Bronc Achievement Center. Looking ahead here. For the Bronc Achievement Center, we're seeking 21.8 million from the legislature. Moving on to the transportation maintenance facility. This has a total project request of 16 million, and it's for a 5 to 7 bay bus barn to replace our current bus barn. And you can see the rendering there. And that would add adequate space for our buses and district vehicles to be stored inside the current lot, which you can see at the bottom right-hand corner of that slide.
Mr. Chair, if you remember in the past, there was some question about why we were requesting a bus barn this large. The bus barn that is the photo and the design that has been developed was really based on the replacement of the bus barn that burned down in Powell, which is a school district about the same size as ours. So I just, we aren't trying to make the biggest bus barn in town or anything, but that was the rationale behind where the size came from. Thank you.
Slide 33 is a summary of our funding sources. And it is truly a combination of various sources. The SPET ballot in November of 22, we're using our major maintenance, safety and security money, a depreciation reserve account, the Teton County Recreation District, private donations. And then the last slide, or sorry, the next slide is basically the summary. A total of 37.8 million is our request. So 21.8 is the partial funding for the Bronc Achievement Center and renovation on the interior of the high school, and 16 million for the bus barn. And having said that, we thank you so much for the time, the consideration that you're giving us, and the opportunity to share what our challenges are and seek your support.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it to questions, I do want to recognize our President of the Senate, Senator Dan Dockstader. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Thank you. Okay, committee questions on for the presenters. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies, thank you. Appreciate the presentation. It's very informative. Serving as chairman of transportation, I've spent a little time with Teton County on that committee as well. So it's not just affecting this part of the world, it's affecting their ability up there to even get from here to there. So my question is the same as I asked Laramie County, which is, have you presented this to the commission? I think I saw where you did, but I just want confirmation. You've gone to the commission, you've gone to the department. What was the reaction to this presentation?
Mr. Chair, Senator Landon, let me begin by telling you that the first time that we went to the commission was, I believe, in July of 2018, which is when we went to get approval for the Mercer study for our secondary schools. We then have been back to the commission this summer in May and in July. And I will say that the reception, I thought the reception was really quite open. In fact, the suggestion at the end of the July meeting was to come forward to you. And as you recall, we sort of wedged our way into your meeting. And I believe it was September. And I know, Mr. Chair, you were a little distressed that we sort of wedged our way in, but they had suggested we move forward to you. So that's, but there was, I mean, I guess I have to take when somebody says you should move forward to the select committee, I guess, and maybe this was a wrong assumption. I took it as an acceptance of the problem.
Just a
Senator
quick
Plant,
follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
I don't know if I can put it in the form of a question, but that's informative to me, because if we have a commission that is sending our districts to us, that changes the complexion a little bit. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Janine. I appreciate it.
Co-Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you for driving all the way across the state again. Do appreciate that. I do have a question in regards to the Bronc Achievement Center and how, and this is just me trying to understand and make sure that I get this complete. It's going to be a split use building. From what I understand, you're going to have community involvement. What have the discussions been thus far on how, as we just discussed earlier this morning, on major maintenance and how we fund things? Has there been a discussion on, are the hallways going to be split 50-50? How are these things going to be, allocated out for costs to the state versus what you guys will be responsible for?
Thank you, Representative Brown and Senator Pappas, Chairman Pappas. The Bronc Achievement Center is partly recreational, although it's going to be used as a classroom space during the day. And then the actual career tech ed classes will be added sort of on the front side of it. We haven't had significant conversation, but we're completely aware that we're not, and that's part of the reason that we went to the community for the SPET ballot for the recreational side, because we recognize that we wouldn't be receiving major maintenance funding for that.
And Mr. Chair, Representative Brown, if I may, our last attempt to get SPET money was when we built our Davy Jackson Elementary School. And at the time, you all know that you did not allow us to build a gymnasium as well as a cafeteria. It was going to be a multi-purpose space, which we felt was not adequate. So consequently, we built a gymnasium. When that school was built was when we established our recreation district. And the reason for establishment of that recreation district is we put $300,000 into a special kitty that was responsible for the maintenance of that portion of the facility. So I don't believe we have any intent to come to the state to pay for the major maintenance on the community use portion of the Bronc Achievement Center.
Committee, further questions? Okay, do I have anybody online? I didn't look. No one raising their hands. Okay. All right, thank you. Before I open it to public comment, I'd like to, I know Senator Dockstader, you're here to speak to us. Would you like to come forward at this time?
Mr. Chairman, co-chair, members of the committee, thank you for the time. Drove over here for one purpose today. Give a little ground support to these folks who've been working on this, Superintendent Chapman and Trustee Teske. They put a lot of effort, and I attended their meetings locally prior to the legislative session last winter and could see what we had. And I won't repeat what was said, but I will tell you that what we have happening out west, north and south of that Snake River Canyon is post-COVID has been incredible. People are moving in. I don't see it slowing down at all. And they're paying whatever is requested for a place. I'm stunned. It's not enough just to come down and buy the whole meadow next to the river, at least on the south end of the canyon. They'll buy the whole hillside that overlooks it too. Price has been no issue. That deals with a whole new property tax problem we've got, but it also deals with our schools. And we share an inseparable economy over there in those two areas in Teton County and Lincoln County, North Lincoln. Roughly 1,100 people make that commute every day. We go on the radio every morning and say, good morning, Jackson 500. And we give them the temperatures up in Teton Village and Wilson and Jackson and all those places, because that's very much a part of their lives. It's all changing. I serve on a board for a member-owned power co-op over there. We reached out, bought some more land next to our offices there to add housing. We're starting with 17 lots. We're not sure exactly how we're going to divide all that up in terms of family housing and individual housing, but our emphasis will be on family housing because we have concerns as a co-op that we have to send our people over the mountain to a place to live or back down a canyon to a place to live, where what they need to do is stay in Jackson where their families are going to school, where everybody's working, where they're doing their business. So we're going to try to keep those families in Jackson to accommodate the growth. But what we found, we pay very good as a co-op, but they can't afford to live there. And so we're looking at developing this housing that adds to the school load. I know the Game and Fish is doing the same thing. I know YDOT is doing the same thing. We're talking with YDOT about trading some housing out so the families can kind of split up and they don't have to work with each other all day and then go home and live next to each other. But we're adding all this, and that means more students in the Jackson schools. But it's a good thing that they can stay there. We want them staying there where they can go to the music events, the athletic events, all the things associated with the schools. So we've reached that point, and they've covered it well, that we've reached capacity and beyond that, and I commend them for being very creative, how they're dealing with the capacity. I sat through those meetings early on and now they just explained it to you. That old bus barn, I don't know, I thought it was reminds me of a shop out on the farm. It's time to get that upgraded. It's time to get things switched around. Actually be parking next to that bus barn tomorrow night for a good old rivalry game up and down the canyon. We expect about 40,000 people tuning in just to watch north and the south. We Jackson and Star Valley play football tomorrow night. Yeah, really. We track the numbers. And every time we play Jackson or Coda, those numbers are coming in. So it's time. It's time to take care of the maintenance facility. It's time to address capacity. I know there's a lot of requests out there, but I'm simply here to offer ground support. They are part of my responsibility, and I've seen how they worked so hard to find the answers, and I'm asking for your support to give them they've worked hard for this, provide for them what they need to address expanding capacity. It's not going to change. Same fiber company that runs high-speed fiber in my valley runs high-speed fiber up there, and people are moving in and they're going to work telecommunicate on the computer. I got a guy in my valley that works for Microsoft in Seattle. He flies up once a month. The rest of the time he works on high-speed internet in our valley. And that's the case with Jackson and all the businesses up there. We've got a strange situation happening post-COVID. It's continuing to grow, and there's no indication that it won't. We've even asked the good folks up in Jackson, maybe if we could send some of the students that live in Star Valley up to Jackson with their parents every morning, go to work, but they've reached capacity, no more. And I understand that. They've reached their full capacity. It's time to find some answers here for an area of the state that just keeps growing. I don't know that we asked for it, but it's coming regardless of whether we want it or not. Lots changing out in the West, and I hope our schools can adjust to it. And I appreciate your consideration, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Questions of the good president, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. President, you're arriving here this afternoon. Your testimony has great impact. Really appreciate you making that effort to give us kind of a boots on the ground view. So thank you for that. I know that that these kinds of requests at this stage in the game are a little out of the ordinary. And one of the things that we've worked very hard under Representative Walter's leadership, mine before then, was to move us in this asset preservation direction over these past 5 or 6 years, and to keep the reins pretty tight. But I think what I'm hearing this afternoon is that if this select committee were to make a couple of recommendations on these hard hit areas of the state, that you might be willing to throw your support behind such a request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Landon, that's correct. I would, because we've seen this change happen rapidly just since COVID. I call it post-COVID. It amazes me that they're coming from all over and just moving in and saying this is home now. And they're bringing families with them, and consequently, Jackson has to deal with it. Star Valley has to deal with it. And I think one thing we have to, if I could summarize with this, sometimes we look at our good neighbors there in Jackson. Well, it's this big, iconic, worldwide iconic destination place. But in the middle of all that, there are people just trying to run schools and do it right, and do it within the framework that we have as a state for financing them. And so for me, I push all of that iconic tourism out of the way and say, here are some good people trying to run a good school. Let's see if we can help them.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. President, thanks for being here to provide support on this. I wanted to follow up on Senator Landon's question, though, and this is a broader problem, obviously, and it's not just unique to the northwestern part of the state and your community, and we see this in other communities. And I guess my question, following on Senator Landon's, is we need a commitment from legislators to address this problem statewide. And I guess I'm asking you, is this a commitment from you to support funding of areas in need for school facilities down here in the southeastern part of the state? For example, we've talked a lot about Laramie County's needs, and they have tremendous growth. They have the same types of circumstances. So when we're looking at packages as the select committee, we want to be advancing something that's fair and equitable across the state, not picking regions, but really bringing forward a policy of recognition that this is a good time for us to be bringing some resources to a problem that's a statewide problem. And so my question to you is this a commitment from you to be supportive then of a broader action across the state where we're trying to provide solutions in this area? Or are you specifically concerned about the northwestern part of the state?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, the answer is yes, if you put together a good package. But what I'm seeing as well, there are very specific areas that it's happening rapidly, and there is no indication that it will slow down in any way.
Okay. Committee for the questions? Okay, thank you, President Dockstader. Glad to have you here today.
Co-chairs, committee, thank.
Okay. Is there any other public testimony on any of the presentations or the before we start working the budget bill? Okay, the department, any further? Oh, we do have a
Senator Hutchings, Mr. Chairman.
sorry, I don't have that. Okay, yeah, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, and that's okay, Mr. Chairman. As I listen to all these requests, and today we've had requests for millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And I would only believe the heart of most of us would say that let's help all of them. How much money, if this is a proper question to ask, do we have? And when you see dire needs at Teton, Laramie County 1 and 2, and the commission coming for all their projects, can we afford this? I guess is the main question. If someone could answer that, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wellmarth.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Hutchings, big picture, the state is required to finance school facilities regardless how much it costs. I mean, it's the state's responsibility. It's a constitutional requirement. In the near term, you will not have revenue issues. I don't foresee. You'll get more details on that next week if you tune into the Joint Appropriations Committee to hear the next consensus revenue estimating groups report. I can't divulge any of those numbers today. But near term, the requests that you see from both Laramie County School District number 1 and Teton County School District number 1, those are certainly policy considerations for the legislature to take action on. But near term, there will be revenue available. Just it's the legislators' responsibility on how they want to prioritize that revenue source.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Any further questions? Okay, before we work the bill, does the department have any final comments that they might want to make on any of these? Just one last shot at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one comment because I heard it brought up, it might have been more of a question, but I didn't want someone to think of it in the wrong way. Both of these districts, process-wise, have come through the department. They've discussed their need with us. We have helped them get in front of the commission in terms of awareness communicate out what the situation is. But because they both bring a uniqueness to them and an urgency to them in a process that isn't in a department guideline right now, or not in the not any statutes or commission rules aren't going to change fast enough for the urgency of the growth and the condition and whatever, based on what the districts are sharing with you, that I think, I don't want to speak for the commission, but you know, the reason that they're before you was to increase the awareness beyond the commission and department. And then if there is an appetite here for some type of bill or a law or some sort of thing, that can happen faster than going through the commission or department, because they don't fall, both these issues, you know, bringing a bus barn up, it's part of a story that you've been told, and it's important to that story, and it's important to them going out getting their own money. But that's not normally, you have other bus barns from an equity standpoint in the state and how they rise and how they come up. So they both are entangled. They both are, their stories are important. Take 6 down, put 3 up, that kind of thing. But it's nothing that, you know, from the urgency standpoint that they both have mentioned, that we as a department or the commission can get through right now. So I think, you know, not to speak for the commission, we both are looking for awareness at the select committee level and to hear the conversation that's probably about to take place, so we can try to figure out how to help or where to go next with this ourselves. And I would think that the commission is feeling the same way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think we're at parts. Thank you. Ms. Hughes.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I would add to what Director Vincent said and point out and say that for both of these, they did not go through the commission for any type of action to get to this point. So they would be going around that process. There are some items on these schedules, if we were to follow that process. The schedules do represent some issues in Laramie County School District number 1. So we would be heading into facility planning at the beginning of next year to again talk about those items. We would be putting together those new schedules or updated schedules at that time, working through the commission with remedies suggested at that time, and going through the appropriate budgeting process to put together numbers for it, at which point we would consider additional information from the districts for this. In terms of the high school in Teton County School District number 1, we understand that there potentially may be a situational or a time issue there with what's going on. However, they do fall on for the high school at number 98 on that schedule, which means that there are 97 other schools that we wouldn't be considering in advance and wouldn't be giving the same opportunity to discuss. And those 97 schools are 24 other districts across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, committee, I think we're, Senator Roth.
Quick question on that. So 97 schools ahead of them, presumably, and if we're talking high schools, the condition from a condition score basis, not from a capacity basis. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, for the Jackson Hole High School, it's on the capacity list at number 98.
Number 98 on the capacity list. Okay, I'll pull that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, committee, we're at the point of working the bill 232. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
The bill has been moved and by the Representative Brown and seconded by Representative Walters. Okay. How would you like to proceed? Would you like to go through the bill page by page and just, okay, I mean.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
are you going page by page, or would you just like to kick it off at some point?
well, whatever you'd like. Okay, let's do, yeah, we'll probably be here all afternoon, you know. All right, let's just kick it off.
So, Mr. Chairman, starting on page 3, the bottom of page 3, line 23 through line 6 on page 4, I would move to delete all of that. And if I get a second, I will explain.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, please.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is funding, this $22 million is funding to address the inflationary changes and pressures from the projects that came out of the 2022 budget bill. And if we say that they have to spend their unanticipated first, those funds won't even be known until the end of the project itself. And so I make this deletion to start with. I'll have a secondary motion to revert anything unspent at the end of 2023. Just because really this is so that they can go to bid, fully fund the project, and anything that's left over comes right back to the state almost immediately. Then any of the unanticipated costs, that's change orders and other stuff that would be standard within any project. And so I think we put too many, make it too difficult to really access these funds in a timely manner. And so that's why I propose eliminating that language for the time being.
Okay, further discussion? Would you repeat those line numbers again?
Mr. Chairman, that would be page 3, line 23, starting with the word the, all of line 23, then on page 4, all of line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 through the word project.
Okay, correct. Thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to insert and ask LSO to find the appropriate spot on page 4 towards the end of that same paragraph to insert language that says these funds shall revert December 30, unused funds from this amount shall revert December 31st of 2023.
Okay,
So that's very conceptual because I don't know exactly where they need to do it from a drafting standpoint.
okay, moved and seconded. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't know that we want to do that because the project lifetimes will not necessarily have concluded by December 31st of 2023. So any required augmentation for due to inflation still may be in queue and not have been consumed by that time, but still may effectively be obligated. So if we put a 23 reversion, but we have an expected obligation, you end up shorting the budget. I understand the intent of basically, if it's not going to be used, let's pull it back. But I don't know that we know that it's not going to be used on that date.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we do know that it will be used because the project will have been bid in full. Anything else that comes up that is a cost overrun or something falls into the unanticipated category that is already part of the budget of that project. And that is the difference in these two volumes of money, as I would describe it. And this is for the initial bid process being higher due to inflation than we anticipated in March of 2022 when we were in session. This volume of money. The unanticipated costs are what you are referring to, Senator Rothfuss, of you've moved forward past the bid because the bid should be a hard number. I am John's Construction and I will build this project for X. Change orders and other things are part of the unanticipated cost. And that is why I believe we can revert these dollars sooner because they are a different volume of money.
And I think I've heard the testimony from the department that, in fact, John, I think mentioned to us that we will know those numbers by December 31st, 2003.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
And maybe I misheard, but it was my understanding that the word unexpended was used as opposed to, for example, unencumbered or unobligated or something along those lines. I may have misheard, but I think that's what I'm getting at is expended might not be what we're shooting for a reversion. But I understand, Representative Walters, your interest is perfectly reasonable. I'm with you on it, but maybe we need to make sure that it's the word choice where it's based on the encumbrance or the obligation or obligations, probably what we are shooting for. I think staff understands the concept anyway. So
Representative Walters?
with that change in concept, I'm an aye.
Okay,
Following Senator Rothfuss's comment, that's exactly what my intention was.
okay. Co-chairman Brown.
Thank you. I'm just kind of curious what I don't know that I've seen reversions happen in the middle of a fiscal year. And so whether or not this would be standard, whether we want to just move this out to the end of the biennium as opposed to the middle of a fiscal year for the auditor's purposes or anything along those lines. And I don't know if that's something staff would look at, whether or not we do that regularly, but I'm not aware of any time that we revert in the middle of a year.
So Matt, can you weigh in?
Mr. Chairman, the legislature has done this in the past. I think there's an intention behind this in that if the money is reverted, it becomes available for reappropriation for the Appropriations Committee or the legislature before the budget session 2024.
Okay. Any other questions on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. Oh, do we have a?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm really enjoying this bill, so I'd like to keep amending it.
Was there a comment? Senator Hutchins, did you have your hand up? Oh, she was just voting.
Sir, I was
Thank you.
just voting. I was just voting.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, continue, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll do this in separate motions, but on page 4, lines 13 through 18, I would move to eliminate that increase in funding for the Albany County land acquisition. If you read the staff notes between what they have left and then also what's available in 2014 and 2015 session law, there is still money that has not reverted for various land acquisitions. And so I think and there has not been an expressed purpose for this other than it has just not been queued up yet. So I don't know that we need to move that forward at this time. So again, move to eliminate that.
Okay, and I have a second, Representative Brown. Yeah, any discussion on that particular amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries.
Mr. Chairman.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then on page 5, lines 9 through 14, I would move to eliminate that. And my reasoning is the same.
Can I have a second? Seconded by Representative Brown. Any discussion? Question being called for. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? That motion is carried. Are we complete? Okay. Does anyone else, committee, have any further amendments to this?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I would move in the appropriate place for staff, wherever this needs to be going here, but I would move to add $79,916,187 to the budget bill for the construction, for all purposes, phase 1, 2, and 3, construction of 2 K4s and a 5-6 school in Laramie County 1. And if I get a second, I'll go into more of that.
It's been seconded.
Second.
Their cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the second, and I appreciate at least a little bit of discussion on this. And I certainly appreciate the district, or I'm sorry, the department coming forward and giving us their 2 cents on this. We've certainly had our discussions on subverting the process and going around the process. So I appreciate that. I'm not one to genuinely do this on a regular basis, but what we have right now is 2 situations where we have to start thinking outside the box. The guardrails that we have set up for us right now are not working. We have a dynamic situation in 2 parts of the state which call for dynamic measures. And I think that with this particular motion, we are going to really help out, number one, Laramie County School District number 1. I can say, being from that particular county, it's not helping my students. As a matter of fact, the students in my particular district, or in my district, have just seen renovations. This is going to be completely on the opposite side of town. But what I can tell you is the schools on that side of town are, I would almost call them deplorable conditions. And we certainly as a state need to be looking at the way we teach our kids. Starts with the environment that they learn in. And this replacement schedule, in my opinion, does exactly what we're looking for it to do. Eliminates 6 schools, brings us into the 21st century, gets that side of the district in line, and also provides us a little bit more capacity compared to what we have right now. But again, I also appreciate staff's work on this as well as the commission's work. I appreciate you, Director Vincent, bringing this and hearing the worries out of this district and Teton County as well, and getting them in front of the commission so the commission understood this. And then I also appreciate the commission bringing them the heads up to push them forward for us. So, Mr. Chairman, those are my remarks.
Okay, further comments from the committee? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support the motion and here are my thoughts. When the process started, when the budget was prepared and when the commission set about its work for this budget, we did not expect to have, 2 quarters to rub together at this meeting today. And the planning then was based on the assumption that we weren't going to be able to provide any remedies for these or other schools. Instead, we're going into a budget session where there will be funding available to tackle projects. And I've served in the legislature to know, or long enough to know, that it's not as if we're going to leave a bunch of those funds on the table when we walk away at the end of the legislative session. So it comes down to prioritization of projects and priorities that we have before us in the legislature. And when we have some budget surplus available, we have to tackle the problems that are at hand. I appreciated the opportunity to tour schools in Laramie County and to understand the capacity challenges as well as the condition challenges that were present in many of the schools. And while not all of the schools that we addressed are remedied by this, I think what we know is that there's a tremendous amount of resources needed by Laramie County to actually achieve appropriate capacity and appropriate condition for the students in those districts. This is a bite at solving that problem, and it's a cohesive one. It addresses South Laramie County's concerns for the district, and does it in a way that honestly makes sense, closes down some of our older schools. It appears to address 6 challenged schools by building 3 schools. Everything about this honestly seems reasonably priced compared to some of the other programs that we have. So while I understand that it's not going directly through the process, we don't have time. Go through the process. We've been talking about this problem for the entire time that I've been on this select committee. We haven't done anything to address it. In addressing Natrona County years ago, we recognized that it was too big of a problem for us to slowly go through the process, one school at a time, and we ended up spending $350-ish million. I don't remember what the total budget price tag on that was, but it was quite a bit to address the high school challenges there in the pathways. I think we're finding ourselves in another situation. This is more modest, but at the end of the day, it probably is a third or a quarter of what probably needs to be done. So I am sensitive to the fact that we don't want this committee to be about picking winners and picking specific projects and moving things forward. But I don't think we can go through the traditional process and actually achieve a remedy for Laramie County. We are where we are. I don't want to assign blame or even go back through history to figure out how we got to this point. But Laramie County is pretty wrapped around the axle right now when it comes to its schools at the elementary school level, and even some of the high schools are struggling. As such, this is achievable. This is affordable. We need to take action on Laramie County. And I appreciate this relatively modest solution, but at least one that is solving that southern triad and moving towards a broader solution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote against this motion, and it's really a procedural motion issue. We have a district that has came before us and presented their idea of what they would like to see occur in the district for the tune of just under $80 million as the amendment here has been proposing. We have not heard from the entirety of the commission to see what are the other needs around the state. Just in March, this very legislative body approved just under $85 million in capital construction for schools. That was less than 9 months ago, 85 million. And now in one motion, we're trying to do 80 million in a supplemental budget. I am not convinced that 1 year from now is going to change the need. I think there is the need there, but I think that the commission does a better job than this body of reviewing all of the needs statewide to ensure that we're allocating our resources statewide to make sure that every district has an opportunity to address those needs. And while I recognize Cheyenne is a growing community, a vibrant community, in 1 year from now, after a year of review by the commission, looking at all of the needs throughout the state, I think this committee will be better informed as to how best to allocate the resources available to the state. I think for us to jump to a conclusion off of a wonderful presentation of need is just premature. I think we need to just, yes, it's slow, but it's slow for a reason. It's slow to try and help us protect ourselves from ourselves, to get it right, to make sure we don't jump to conclusions, and to make sure we do it right. I'd like to hear what the commission has to say about the Mercer study. The Mercer study that was referenced by Laramie County was a 2018 Mercer study based on 9 through 12. That Mercer study is what was approved by the commission, was a 9 through 12 assessment, not a K through 12 assessment, but a 9 through 12 assessment that we're now talking about building elementary schools. So I don't know that the commission really understands what was done in that Mercer study. I don't know that any of us understand the full scope of that Mercer study, and yet we're asked to spend $80 million or just under 80 million. When again, we only less than 9 months ago spent 85 million total for capital construction. Of that, 21 million of it went to 14 different schools for component level projects. That's what I'm referring to about making sure we address the needs throughout the state of Wyoming and not just in a couple of districts. That is the purpose of this commission. The commission has treated this committee very well over the years, as they have brought us good, broad-based approaches to addressing all of our educational needs throughout the state. I don't think there's enough money in the surplus that may come about in Craig's report next week to address all of our educational needs statewide. I know Campbell County has issues. Natrona County brought proposals last year for issues for renovations versus new construction. Every district in the state has condition issues, has capacity issues, have some sort of issues. And that is the beauty of using our commission system. Our commission does a good job of reviewing all of those needs statewide and presenting a full scope, a full view of what's going on in the state to this committee to make our recommendations from. And so that's why at this time, I cannot support this project or the other project. I certainly see the need. And again, I think I don't see it as a dire emergency. Yes, it will need to be addressed in the next year or two, but 1 year from now, in a full budget cycle with full commission review, full commission of a study of these issues, I think is when these projects will appropriately move forward. So again, I will be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, committee, further comments? I certainly can weigh in on this as well. And while I'm one who believes that we have a process, a commission process, and we should use it when we can. But ultimately, the commission is basic in an advisory body to us, right? We have the dollars. They don't recommend budgets. We recommend budgets, and it's certainly not unprecedented. How many times have we done this in the past for other schools? Countless times. And quite frankly, I agree with Senator Rothfuss's position, and respectfully disagree with yours, Representative Walters. Kicking the can down the road, I've seen that happen. We saw it with Cary Junior High, and we've seen it with other schools. And what happens, especially in this age of unprecedented inflation for us, it's just waiting another year is just not, we're going to come up with the same solution, at a higher cost. And so, yeah, we're going outside this, outside of the designated process. But frankly, as was mentioned before, you know, the process is not nimble enough in my book to take care of very rapidly changing times. And so you know, government moves slowly. And to your point, maybe it should, but frankly, that costs us a lot of money. And we know the need is there. I say, let's just get it done. Anyhow, further comments? Representative Cost or Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, weighing all the odds and looking at everything, had the commission not been involved, had the director not been involved with his group, I would have had a problem with it. But because they were involved and they recommended that they bring it forward to us, I don't have near the angst that I would have the other way. This has been discussed. It's been talked about. Inflation, as you say, everything that everybody's brought up is a good point. But I feel we need to take a step out there and move forward and say, let's get a couple of projects done here that have a need.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a couple of things that I wish. I wish that I would have seen this proposal before this afternoon, you know, today. I also wish that it would have been accompanied by some sort of recommendation from our commission, which it was not. I'm really torn with this because in my mind, I'm going back 6 years from when I was chairing this committee and toured those facilities in Laramie County. I've been in those schools, and back then I knew that we had to have something done with them. At that time, we proposed a renovation from 20 to 30 million dollars that would have fixed about 5 of those schools. And that was turned down in favor of Cary. So I get it. And we have been on this Laramie County issue for all those years. So that gives me pause. And I know we've got a fix that we need to do there. But we can't do one of these this afternoon without doing the other. So that boosts us up to 120 million that we would be, as the representative pointed out, we would be essentially knee jerking it based on a couple of proposals this afternoon. I just struggle with going outside of the system in that fashion. And so I'm going to be a no on this, but if it does go forward, I will lend my support to the committee. I can't support it this afternoon.
Okay. Oh, I see that. Senator Harshman or Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members in support, and I first started serving on this committee. I chaired it in 2009, chaired the Facilities Committee for 4 years, served on it since then. And this is not a new issue. And Laramie County's had, you know, the most kids in portables. The whole state combined doesn't have as many kids in portables as Laramie County does. The problem with our current system is we don't have a way to respond to a district like Laramie County and Teton County, frankly, it's growing quickly. And, you know, you think of Clark County in Nevada, where they're building a brand new high school every year, you know, with such growth. And I think it's been always a thing I've talked about on this committee is how are we going to respond? And you know, Wyoming is still a small town with long streets. We all know what's going on in Cheyenne. This is not rocket science to fix this, and it's not something new that has bypassed some process that we set up, frankly. And then finally, I just say, we're going to save a pile of money like we always do. I think, you know, CapFin is looking at saving $700 million so we can invest our money more efficiently and get a return of maybe as much as 100 million more a year by saving 700 million. And so there's going to be all kinds of ways that we're going to save money and invest money. And building these buildings, I've always been a proponent of investing in our infrastructure. It is one of the greatest ways to save money we have. And in my time, we've been very fortunate, and I had some great mentors, but this is a great way to save money. And it's going to put a lot of Wyoming people to work as well. And these buildings are going to be here for 80 more years. And then someone else sitting in these chairs will be talking about how we redo them. So I urge the committee to support. This is not new. It's not going to go away, and it's not going to get any cheaper. And so let's make the investment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Harshman. Representative Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for me, being new on this committee, I look at this and I look at the projects and I think, we need a more nimble way of doing this, no doubt, to react to it. But boy, it just seems very concerning to me to go from $30 million to 150. It seems like it seemed like it's maybe putting the entire bill in jeopardy. And so I just wanted to throw that out to the committee that, it's one thing to sell 31 million, but it's something else on the floor to sell 150 million. And so, I don't know, it just seemed like a precarious place to be.
Representative Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Senator Landon, excuse me.
They can't put us on the same side.
That's okay, Senator. That's not a problem. You and me sit together.
Yeah.
So, no, this is a really good discussion, and I'm glad that we're having it. One of the things that this select committee, one of our jobs, frankly, is to go forward on behalf of this constituency and on behalf of school facilities policy. And so whichever way we land on things this afternoon, we will have done our job in vetting it as best we can and going forward with it. And then it's up to us to advocate, wherever we're supposed to land here. But in a lot of respects, it's a good thing that we're having this discussion, because it's two hot points that we've known about for a while. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hutchins, I see your microphone's off. Did you want to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a quick comment or question. All this is going to have to go before appropriations. The Teton Group, the Laramie County Group, the commission, they're all going to have to go there and make their plea there as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on some of the comments, and I respect my colleagues and their concerns about this addition. With regard to this being new, the concept of this being new, I don't feel that it's new. I understand the idea that this particular proposal, as structured with these three schools, is something that we hadn't seen in this fashion before. But when we look at the remedies of what we're actually trying to address, where we have these 6 schools in Laramie County, that it's a 6-school remedy. That's an important thing to realize. We're looking to potentially build 3 schools to remedy 6 schools. Every one of those 6 schools is a priority school for remedy on the condition score and often on the capacity score. They're all on our to-do list, and they're all high priority on our to-do list. The nuance is each one might not be the next on the list. As it turns out, ARP is the highest priority in terms of schools for capacity. And Fairview is second only to Hobbs, which I just kind of regret that we're not also finding a way to solve Hobbs, but we're not, but it's next. And then the others that are present here, I think, are all on page 1 of our many pages of these schools have poor condition scores. There's no way to do it in Laramie County without having a project. It's not a one-off next on the list approach because it's a large community. There's a lot going on. And again, I would have preferred this to be a project that had been developed over the past several years that we'd seen as a large solution packaged, put through the entire process, and it came with the blessing of the commission also. That would have been better. But as the good chairman pointed out, at the end of the day, the buck stops here. This is the select committee that makes the recommendations. We're the elected officials that move forward the remedies. And in the absence of alternatives that provide solutions for these schools, we need to get something done. We can't just keep waiting and talking. And when it comes to Laramie County, we've done a lot of waiting and talking over the 12 years that I've served on the select committee. And I think this is a perfectly reasonable approach that again addresses 6 of the many schools that we probably need to provide remedies for.
Co-Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple things, and I'll make this quick because, you know, we've kind of started beating a dead horse here, but 6 of the most dangerous words that we hear on a regular basis are "we've always done it this way." And we're starting to see that happen with the commission process. We have unique needs that are seen across the state on a regular basis. And again, I go back to dynamic needs mean dynamic actions. We're not in a static situation where we cannot adjust what we do on a daily basis. So I would implore this committee to think about that. Number one, if this was your community and we had issues going forward, and this was going to affect your constituents, or even if it was just in your community and not affecting your constituents, the voice and the change would likely be there. I would ask this committee here, what's the downside of doing this? Quite literally, what is the downside of spending the money that we know we're going to have and eliminating a major portion of some of the issues that we have in Laramie County 1 with our school facilities? We have better accommodations for our students. We have economic development because people are willing to move to a location where their schools and their children are going to be in better locations. And we're at a point in time right now where we actually have the money. We don't have this very often in this state. It's we're in the booms and the busts. And frankly, I say this exact same thing for Teton County. I staring back there at them, and I say the exact same thing for them. Need I remind this committee, when you look at the age of these schools, this is just the schools that we're looking at knocking down. 66 years average age. We build schools now to get 50 years out of them. We're renovating them to maybe get another 25. The high school that I graduated from, my mom graduated from 40 some odd years ago now. And we still send students to that school as well. Laramie County has 17 of the top 25 oldest schools in the state. We're looking at trying to eliminate some of that. We're looking at trying to take care of our kids in a community that is growing. We also have ground-based strategic deterrent, the new missile system coming into our community, calling for upwards of 10,000 people over the next 10 years. We're at a capacity issue just like Teton County is right now in my community, and it's not going to go away. Kicking the can down the road for the commission to take a look at this, for them to come back and tell us the exact same thing that we have sitting right here, and to put a rubber stamp on something that we were elected to do and that they were appointed to do, doesn't change the outcome. We are the elected officials. We make the tough decisions. Passing the buck on to the commission and asking them to give us a rubber stamp so we feel comfortable with the process does not change. I understand, and I'm not one to subvert the process on a regular basis, but we are in a situation where we have the opportunity to fix a problem, and I would urge your committee support.
Committee, further discussion? Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep it short. First of all, we talk about equity of education throughout the state. Having gone through that school, kids sitting in a little book room trying to learn how to read. And we're saying that that's quality education, good for our kids and all. I don't see it. Kids sitting in the hall trying to be paying attention with the teacher while they're trying to work on reading. I don't see it. I think the one thing that resonates with me that I heard about a week or two ago, and it really makes sense. We're driving the car. Are we looking through the back windshield or window, or are we looking through the front windshield? We're looking through the back window. We might end up in a wreck. If we're looking in the front windshield, we can pick our path. We know where we're going, and we know what the future is going to bring for us. It's time to vote for this and move it on. We've got two different groups that are going to look at it. Appropriations, and then the Senate and the representatives. So it's not like it's a done deal today, but we can sure try our hardest to get it through. I think it's a start and the right thing to do.
Okay, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to address the good co-chairman's question of what's the downside of doing this? Well, the downside is we have a bill for $31 million in front of us before this amendment that the school capital construction account doesn't have enough money in it to cover. So those dollars are all going to be general fund dollars. So what is the downside? It's just us prioritizing how to spend state general fund dollars. Do we want to provide property tax relief to all the citizens of Wyoming? I don't know. Do we want to provide property tax relief to senior citizens around Wyoming? Or do we want to spend this on school age children in what I hope would become two districts? I hope the co-chairman doesn't just focus on the district he represents in a later motion. I hope there's something more coming forward. But that is the downside to this kind of a motion. There is going to be limited financial resources, and we are saying we're willing to spend in this motion $80 million for kids that could, in one district, that could be spent statewide. We could spend $80 million for kids statewide in all 48 school districts because there are component issues in every one of these districts. And that is what I was describing earlier, is we have not taken a look at all of the state's needs when we're stepping up to spend $80 million right now. That is the purpose of the commission, is to review all of the needs statewide, not just what has been proposed to us. I don't believe the commission will come back to us with a rubber stamp on this proposal. I think they will look at it in depth and may have a different proposal for Laramie County, still recognizing the need to do something in Laramie County. But again, we don't know that what they'll come forward with might not be 3 or 4 or 8 renovations, 10 renovations for $80 million, $8 million a school around the district. Will address far more students than building 3 new schools here. We don't know what they would come up with given the opportunity, because we have not given that commission the opportunity on how to best address the needs in Laramie County. That's why I plead for us to vote no on this today. Let the process work. Let the commission review these projects and come forward with the best use of our financial resources. So yes, there is a downside to spending these dollars on these projects, and that is they could be spent elsewhere, and they could possibly be spent more efficiently in this very district we're discussing. This is just what the district has came up with today. If we gave them $50 million, they'd probably come to us with a different proposal if we said that's all we can do. This is their dream. This is their wish list. I love it. I think it's great, but I don't think it's proper in a timing situation. It needs to go through the commission so we can review all of the state's needs and make sure this is truly the best use of the resources for that district. Again, a no vote on this proposal.
Okay, the question's been called for. All those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? So we have 3 noes. 3 noes. And okay, show of hands. Aye. Okay, is Representative Harshman online? I can't tell. So Representative Harshman, how do you vote? apparently away from his computer. So, oh, okay. What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 to 4, right?
Mr. Chairman, does it require a majority of each house?
No. Correct? Am I correct? No?
That's correct. This committee didn't adopt special rules.
Okay, so that amendment passes. Okay, committee, further amendments? Senator Rothus.
Mr. Chairman, based on the conversation that we had, I would also move the Teton proposal as presented. That would be 37.8 million in total, broken down into the 21.8 million and $16 million as presented.
It's been moved by Senator Rothfuss, seconded by Senator Cost. I imagine the conversation is the same.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
but-
ditto.
But I'll let everybody speak to it if they want to.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Walters.
Mr. Chairman, just a question to the bringer of the amendment. Would there be a desire to put a caveat on it that it's contingent on them passing their spet ballot? Or do we pass it unconditionally? Otherwise, we're just leaving that money hanging if they don't come up with their portion.
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent, let's see, is there any constitutional concerns, I guess, with something like that is all I would ask for. I don't know that there
Matt.
is, but
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe the election will be in November. So by the time the Joint Appropriations Committee takes this up for consideration during the December budget hearings, we'll know the result of that election. So, but if you can, I think you can condition your recommendation under this.
Certainly will be providing, I'll be providing a memo to the committee that goes along with this bill,
yeah.
and I can certainly include that.
Right. Well, no, I'm fully in agreement with Representative Walters on this, that we don't want to to fund this if it isn't, if that ballot initiative does go forward.
Mr. Chairman, the ballot initiative under, with my understanding, is related to the Jackson Hole High School. It's separate and apart from the transportation and maintenance facility. So I don't know if the condition on the appropriation is only related to the Jackson Hole High School piece of it, which is 21.8 million, or if it's on the entire amount.
Yeah, let's instead, I think we can be silent and then we can include in the letter let's look back to appropriations. Let's look back and check on the outcome from the special purpose election, and then have the appropriations committee upon consideration reflect on whether something needs to be struck or not. So I'll return to the original motion based on the timing, if that's okay with everyone.
Further comments? Questions been called for? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Okay, and those opposed? Okay, it's the same vote as last time, 5 to 4. Any further? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I didn't know if you needed a formal motion in this regard, because you just alluded to what I was going to move, and that is that we hopefully do a good job of representing the debate and the discussion that we had today regarding both of these issues. I think there's strong support for both of these projects in both of these districts. I want the committee to know I have nothing but admiration for all the work that's gone into both of these proposals. I like them both. I just share the concerns of the representative, but I'd like to see that reflected in a memorandum that goes to the Appropriations Committee. That I think that for me, that the negative was simply that it jumps into the process at a time that I don't think is right. So I just have a problem with when it came. I told you that I would support the proposal if the committee goes forward with it, and I will live up to that absolutely. But I'm moving that the two chairmen send a memorandum to the Appropriations Committee with great explanation on this.
Okay, well, I don't think we need a motion on that. Because that's definitely my intention.
Okay, thank you.
And I know staff will help draft a letter that will encompass everything that we talked about. And be explicit in our thoughts about the issue and about the process as well. They need to understand our conversation and where we came from. More information for the Appropriations Committee, the better they are, and certainly Representative Walters will be able to explain to them, having sat through all these conversations as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further, Senator Rothfuss?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, going back to our discussion this morning about the School for the Deaf, I'll make a motion to include language in this bill draft to provide an appropriation to Natrona County School District number 1 to purchase at its appraised value the property under consideration from whoever we determine is the actual owner. The state, yeah, we'll just go with from the state, exactly. And then to have a reversion of the incoming appropriation accordingly, so that it zeroes itself back out at the end of the budget.
Okay. I've got a set from Senator Cost. All those, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. Further amendment. Okay, question on the bill as amended. Maybe we have a roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman, on 23 LSO 0232 supplemental K-12 school facilities appropriations as amended. Senator Hutchings,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Senator Landon, Senator Rothfuss, Representative Banks, Representative Harshman,
Excused. Oh, he's back. All right.
Representative Jennings. Representative Walters.
No.
Vice Chairman Brown,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 9 ayes, 1 no.
Okay, thank you. That bill draft has passed. That brings us to the end of our agenda. One thing I wanted to ask, did the committee want to do anything about recall our conversation on the square footage in relationship to major maintenance, the 115% versus some other number? Do we want to do anything about that? And can we do anything about that at this time? Senator Rothfuss.
If we wanted to do some sort of a patchwork solution, I guess that would be okay. But honestly, I think we need to fix it. And I think fixing it requires a fundamental change in the process, which means that we need to do a lot of work. And that means then doing it next year.
So probably something for an interim topic.
I think we should. I think we should change the structure of it next interim and come up with something that appropriately recognizes. If there was a desire to do some like patchwork one-off, I guess we could do that, but it seems like an unnecessary complication.
I think it'd be too late right now unless it was an individual bill. But I'll just ask the staff to put that in their notes for the next interim. Okay, any other further business? I suppose I should open it to public comment or anything that was discussed today. Anybody want any last words out there? We do have one comment. Janine, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Janine Baytuski from Teton County. I thank you for all the good discussion that happened today, but I think one of the points that's missed, there's a couple of points that really need to be addressed. And I am more than happy to work with whoever to help with this. But I certainly think that there are process issues that need to be addressed that I think could help us to move things along quicker. Because as you look at some of the factors, I would say that lag, for example, the fact that you have attendance data that gets taken in October, you don't have official data until mid-December. Think about the time lag that that's putting into the process in terms of by mid-December, you all are going out of the interim. That's number one. In addition, what really frightens me the most is when you look at the environment in which we're living in right now, with the hyperinflation that we're living in, every year that we delay on these projects is how much more money into the cost of delivering those projects as well. So if you want help in trying to work on the process, where can we take time out? How can we compress? What can we do different? I am more than happy to sign up and help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? Hearing none, then I'll declare is there a motion to adjourn? I don't know that we need one.
You don't need one.
Okay, then I'll just, yes.
Thank you. Just real quickly, I wanted to give a tip of the Stetson to Senator Cost. I think this will be his last school facilities meeting. And he's been an excellent member of this committee and done a great job in his years in the Senate. So thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I declare this meeting adjourned.